when you look historically at on-prem environment, when you went and installed a new network in your office or whatnot, the first consideration or one of the first considerations before the network was even up was security. And somewhere in the evolution of cloud, everything switched. And instead you saw developers moving first and then security coming and shouting at them, change the things that they're doing. I am aiming for a future where security by design is baked into the cloud architecture. And it's a consideration from the get-go, or rather from the point in which they're starting to use native. And because of that, I do think that we are fundamentally changing how cloud security is done.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spyro Circle, this time in collaboration with Forbes Israel. Recently, I spoke with Gal Ordo, the co-founder and CPO at Native Security. Native Security is a cyber company out of Israel doing things a little differently. They're taking the conventional challenges faced by CISOs and kind of reinventing the way that they can protect their enterprises. And they already have a lot of validation behind them. They were founded a couple of years ago in 2024, but they only just emerged from stealth recently this year. They have $42 million in funding, and they have Phil Venables, the former CISO at Google Cloud, on their board. So there's the industry validation and the financial validation. And so Gal and I speak all about what are the things that the company is really trying to address. We also dived a bit deeper into Gal as a person, as a co-founder, and his time in Amazon before he entered the scrappy startup world. And we also addressed some of the ways that he relaxes after a stressful day at work. I hope you enjoy. Gal, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, James. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I want to hear all about the company and your journey and some of the things that you folks are up to. But I want you, please, if I may, I'm going to ask you to please paint a picture for us. So a CISO, he or she walks into their office on a Monday morning in 2026, kind of as of now. And what are they looking at? What do they see? What are some of the challenges that they are faced with?
So I actually think that security leaders these days are very disempowered. A security leader walks into the office, and at the end of the day, what they want to say is, here is a security outcome. Make sure that it's enforced. Make sure that it always happens. For example, my sensitive information can never be accessed from the internet. That's easy enough to say, but then they have their team sitting in front of them, and the same CISO give them this outcome, and the team is starting to say, oh, it's going to take me months and months to implement, and we cannot implement that safely or in a way that's fully comprehensive, and so on and so forth. And it would take us 5 months to implement on that one environment, an additional 5 months to implement on that other environment. And the CISO is like, all I wanted is for that single sentence to be achieved. So I think today leaders are actually very disempowered. And as a result of that, the industry has went to a place where they give them multiple dashboards and ability to look at their current state. But in reality, I don't think that's what they want. I think they want to enforce security and to make sure that they're always secure rather than look at a point in time, be reactive, react to incidents and have fire drills all the time.
So that's really helpful. Thank you. And I hope it paints a picture for the listeners or viewers who are tuning in today, because I want to give some numbers and some context for why we're talking and why this matters so much. So I did some research outside of ahead of this, and correct me if you have any other data that may support or contradict this, but from what I found, 80% of cloud breaches stem from misconfigurations. So it's not even sophisticated attacks. It's just things being done kind of incorrectly. 88% of enterprises operate across hybrid or multi-cloud environments, and only 33% have a unified security strategy across those clouds. So there's a lot of enterprises that are going in a direction, but not nearly as many of them are doing it appropriately or effectively. And I suppose that's where you guys come in. So talk us through a bit about native security and where you are. You founded in 2024, but you emerged from stealth quite recently with $42 million of funding. That's $31 million in a Series A. But I want to hear it from you. So talk us through a bit about some of the things you identified and your background that led us to this moment.
So you said a lot of numbers, and most of them are correct. In fact, the number that surprised me the most was you said 33% of enterprises say that they have a unified security programs across their cloud provider. This actually strikes me as high based on customer conversations that I'm having. In reality, we are talking about the human element. In reality, what I'm seeing when I talk to customers and security leaders is a skill gap. To your point, the vast majority of enterprises in the cloud, in the world, are multi-cloud. And, I often hear, I have, for example, AWS and Google, and I know very well what I'm doing on my AWS. And I don't know at all what I'm doing on my Google. Like I keep hearing about this from the vast majority of our customers. It stems from the fact that even though the vast majority of enterprises are multi-cloud, the revolution led them to be in multi-cloud, right? They started from one cloud and then moved on to the other, and they have 70% of workloads on one cloud and 30% on the other. And they hired expertise that focus on that one cloud and not as much as the other. In any case, to your question about the company itself, we started Native, to your point exactly, 2 years ago with, I want to say, sort of two insights as we went into this journey. The first one being security leaders are tired of being reactive and waiting for stuff to happen. Rather, they want to go and build defenses that are rooted within the architecture of the cloud itself. And I've been in cloud security for over 4 years. Prior to starting Native, I've been with AWS doing cloud security for them.
We'll get all into
But
that as well because I want to hear all about that definitely.
happy to. But really, my point is, I've heard about that challenge of moving from a reactive security to more proactive security, even during my time at AWS. But I'm seeing that becoming even more prominent over the last, 6 or 12 months because of everything going on with AI. Customers want to make sure that they have guardrails around its non-deterministic behavior and that they're able to protect from the fast attacks that it does. So that was the first insight. The second insight, that the building blocks to build those architectural defenses to make sure that the bad stuff does not happen, and it can be misconfigurations, but it can be a lot of other things as well. The guardrails for that are all within the cloud providers. They provide the best guardrails to make sure that bad stuff does not happen, and that's on the identity and resource and network level, and even on the AI level. But I've seen our customers underutilize them because they're heavily technical, because in existing environments, they could break stuff if you're not using them correctly. Because it's not one and done job. After you put on your guardrails, you need to manage exceptions and account for how changes in the cloud providers occur and so on. And finally, and that's the key point about multi-cloud, you don't just do that in one cloud, you do that in all of your cloud. And each of them, each of them is so different. It's like they're speaking completely different languages.
Well, yeah, I want to actually touch on that as well. I mean, obviously I'm not an enterprise, right? But I understand the using different clouds. I mean, for some reason, I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. It's very strange. For some reason, I have one thing on, let's say, OneDrive, and then I have a whole other part of my life on Google, and then I have a whole other part of my life on iCloud. And I've found myself kind of assigning different clouds passively. I didn't even kind of actively do it. I just kind of found my way doing that. And so what you're kind of saying is that enterprises have found themselves doing that, which is quite a dangerous thing because of the things you outlined. You don't know where things are. You don't know what needs attention. You're deploying across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Oracle altogether. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
So each, as you mentioned, each one of those is completely different. They have different looks and feels, but they also have different APIs and they have different identity models and they have different logic and they all operate differently. So how do you give the CISO confidence that you can basically say, don't worry about it, we got this, you know?
Yeah,
Talk us through that.
I think it goes back to what I said to kick us off, right? With that picture that I painted, CISO goes into the room, says that one sentence, again, my sensitive data should not be exposed to the internet. There is nothing cloud specific about that sentence, or nothing provider specific about that sentence. It holds in AWS, and it holds in Azure, and it holds in Google or in Oracle, just the same. And we give them and their team that platform where they can truly go in and input that sentence or tell us that sentence, and we translate that into the technical controls. Basically, we sort of abstract the individual technical complexities within each cloud and give them the way to take that outcome and translate it into that enforceable control.
Wow. Wow. So you're basically instilling confidence in the folks who may be either a bit overwhelmed or not even maybe know what it is they need sometimes. A lot of the times people don't even often know what they need until they're presented with something that is fixing a challenge or
Yeah.
an issue or addressing something they didn't necessarily know.
So I'm not saying this example that I gave is an actual example from one of our customers. As you mentioned, James, we started the company about 2 years ago. And about 6 months into the company, we met up with the chief cloud security architect for Fortune 100, who told us exactly that. They have split across AWS, Azure, and Google. And they told us, hey, we have specific cloud accounts which should never be accessible from the internet. I want to just say that. But each provider has its own complexity. In Azure, they give me about 40 built-in policies for internet accessibilities for some of my services. But how do I know that it's all of the services? And how do I know that there is no new service coming out that tomorrow I'm saying I'm completely air-gapped, but in reality, there is something new that I didn't consider? Then he said, on AWS, there is cross-service dependency. I put a control around, for example, S3, but I might break CloudFront or Glue or Athena or some of the other services that rely on those. And he was like, I don't want to deal with that. It's sure, I can do that and I can do the research, and it's going to take me a year to go and research each of those clouds and the authentication patterns and write the controls. And by the time I'm done, there are going to be changes, and I'm going to need to do that over and over again. And it's a never-ending cycle. We call that the cycle of cloud security operationalization. And we try to give them the features within the platform to sort of walk them through that. So it's not just, hey, give me that outcome and I'll do the translation, but it's also the confidence that tomorrow, if there is an update, tomorrow there is a new cross-service access pattern, or AWS or one of the other providers launch a new way of accessing the cloud and so on. We highlight that update to the customer and we tell them, you had an intention to fully block from internet access, but you've drifted away from it. Or what you had before is not 100% effective now, and here's the update. And that's a big piece of that same confidence, if you will, to use your words from earlier on, that our customers are seeking from us. The fact that they have those architectural preventive guardrails that always protect them.
But then, I mean, that all makes sense. And I am going to push you back on this a bit because still we have that number, right? Of like the 80% of these breaches are kind of human error or misconfigurations. So who's responsible for that? Because at what point do these kind of things become like a culture problem in the enterprise, or it's like a knowledge gap between what people or what CISOs should be doing and what they are doing? Was it a tooling problem, which is something that Native is trying to fix? Like, what can explain like the human error judgment?
Yeah, so it's exactly that, right? So the average enterprise also has hundreds or thousands of developers writing code into the cloud. And you can't just go and expect all of them to write in accordance with the same security standard and be familiar with the latest patterns and so on, which is why you need to place enforcement, preventative enforcement, to make sure that whatever you don't want to happen can never happen. That's why historically, you look 3, 4, 5 years ago, people started using code scanning tools. Wiz has a code scanning model. All of the CNAPs out there have a code scanning model that goes and scans the code. The issue with code scanning is that it looks at what the specific developer does very narrowly, and it doesn't consider the entire environment. The same outcome, hey, this should not be internet accessible, or even more complex outcomes such as production and non-production should never talk between them. They're not developer specific. They're not resource specific. They're correct for the entire cloud environment. And because of that, you need an architectural layer that always enforces that, no matter who the developer is, no matter if it's going through a pipeline or not. If they're going into the console and playing around with their mouse and doing a bunch of stuff, you need that to always be enforced no matter how it works. And this is where I think the innovation from native comes. First, we are not resource specific, but rather we give the CISO the tools that they need in order to focus on those security outcomes that are not developer specifically. And secondly, secondly, we go and do the enforcement within the cloud rather than some external place, such that it always holds. To go back to that human element that you kept talking about, it does introduce friction between security and developers, because historically developers have been used to being able to do everything that they want within their cloud. And then if there is any big issue, then security comes and shouts at them. And all of a sudden, I'm offering a model where security actually builds protections into the cloud where a developer might actually be denied action. And we added a bunch of capabilities into the platform to sort of shorten the cycle between developers and security, be that, notifications to developers if they're being blocked on something and how to fix that, and so on and so forth. So and the ability to ask for exceptions. So developers are actually part of that cycle rather than being all frustrated about, oh, I'm blocked and I don't actually know why.
I've heard that before, the conflicts between the engineers versus the CISOs versus the finance teams. There are all of these kind of like relationships that need to be kind of managed carefully. Take us back to your time at AWS and within Amazon, because you have experience within kind of one of the largest, most kind of mature companies in the sense of security. So what did you see there to open your eyes to what maybe people needed? Like what were the operations happening inside Amazon like? Because that's a whole different beast, right? That's very different from a scrappy startup.
It is. And being a part of Amazon has been amazing. So both myself as well as my two other co-founders come from similar experience. I met one of them while working in Amazon. The two of us led two of their largest security products. And then our third co-founder, he was VP of cloud security at Checkpoint. So another large security company operating at scale with thousands of customers. My specific product had, for example, tens of thousands of customers, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue across different segments. So it was amazing visibility. I remember joining AWS and being overwhelmed, really. And two sort of experiences during my first month at AWS, I think really paved the path to the idea that native is today. The first one is I joined AWS my first week, and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be the product leader for this product. I need to know how to use that. So they gave me all of these templates for installing the product and make sure that it works. And I was like, no, I need to do this hands-on myself, not get a ready template from an AWS colleague, but rather do this myself like any normal customer would to see, is this easy? Is this hard? What's the experience? And it took me about 4 or 5 days to get my product fully working. Trial and error and installing this and removing that. And I remember asking myself, this is supposed to be one of the most adopted security products for AWS, one of the ones that we recommend all of our customers. It was so hard for me to install. And I am within AWS, I'm the product leader for that. What does it mean for a customer going in the first time trying to use that? At best, they give up. At worst, they misconfigure it, and then they don't have active security coverage.
Leading to
And
the statistic that we keep coming back to, which is
100%, 100%. And that to me got eventually translated to the insight that started native, right? Like the building blocks are there, they're strong, they're powerful, but they're hard for customers to use. Now, this was just about the turning on, not even about operationalizing and making consistent use. And the other platform, and that actually brings me to my second story. About a month into my tenure at AWS, I was invited to what's known as an EBC, Executive Briefing Center, to meet up with, that was my first CISO meeting on behalf of Amazon. Well, my first meeting with the CISO of a Fortune 100 was in person in Seattle at our headquarters, meeting up with the CISO and VP Cloud Security. And there were like 15 or 20 people within the room from the customer side, with this Fortune 100, maybe even Fortune 50. And I remember them coming to me and telling me I was leading Security Hub. It's the built-in SIEM app for AWS. It's a detection product. And I remember them telling me, Gal, we absolutely love your detections. They're timely, they're correct. It gives us the visibility that we need. But man, I have 1,000 copies of the same finding across different locations. Why do you even allow me to get to that place? Why don't you just give me the sort of the knob to say, this can never happen in the first place, and then I don't need to be reactive. I don't need those findings. That was about a month into my time at AWS, so I went and researched. And obviously, Security Hub didn't have the answer, but I went and spoke to the other teams, the identity teams and so on, that actually work on the preventive capabilities to stop this from happening. And I remember about a week or two later, I had a Zoom catch up with the same customer, and I showed them technical policies like literal JSON files that included the code to make sure that this never happens. And the customer is like, great. So that's one finding type, but Security Hub has 200 or 300 finding types, and there are more things that we would like to enforce. And now we need to go and do this for each of them. That they were like, we are never going to finish with there is not going to be enough time for us to do any of the other projects on our roadmap, or to even cover all of the outcomes that we want to enforce to make sure that they never happen. So these insights, that were spread throughout my time at AWS, but started from the very beginning, have, planted the seed within my mind that, hey, we need to help those customers and something needs to change. And that eventually led to the idea of native and to study native.
Wow, that's amazing. I couldn't have asked for a neater way for you to outline your experience and then those aha moments that I find so valuable to hear from guests and founders generally, even ones I don't speak to like this, but hearing their story. I want to speak about now another part of your validation process, because not only do you have the validation in the kind of funding that we mentioned and the splash that you've made there, but you've also got Phil Venables, who's the former CISO of Google Cloud, on your board. So that's a big name. It's a big get, so to speak. What are some of the things that you said to get him on the board, and also on board, if you pardon the pun?
Yeah. I think we saw validation, from Phil and from his other partners at Ballistic Ventures, as well as from other, CISOs and security leaders who became our advisors or investors to other VCs and so on. But really, our first conversation with Phil was focused on a similar story to the one that I started the podcast with. That translation of outcome to technical to technical coverage and technical capabilities. And we sat there and we told them a version of the same story, and we went a bit more technical into details. And I said, hey, like this internet exposure policy that I would like to put in, sure, you need the network controls, and that's the thing that jumps to mind immediately. But you also need identity controls and resource controls to sort of go and bridge the gap. And as we told him that I don't want the customer to focus on any individual technical capability, but rather about the outcome, he said to me something about policy-oriented security is the only way about going into about actually doing security, or rather outcome-oriented security. It's not about the technical capabilities. It's about what you actually want to achieve. Then it's up to native to become the translation layer. During his time at Google, Phil, I know, worked closely on some security capabilities, customer-facing security capabilities that were trying to achieve that instead of writing a technical policy, the customer would go and say their outcome, and Google would do the rest behind the scene. And he made some good success in there. I actually think that Google has some fairly mature enforcement controls. And we aim to provide that unified layer, not just across Google. We do have customers that are single cloud, but across all of the cloud providers, and the multi-cloud case makes everything that we do far clearer, far easier to digest, because to our point from earlier on, each cloud is completely different. And even though Phil in Google was a visionary and worked on some outcome-based security capabilities for Google, those that exist in the other cloud providers work super differently. And there is even no one-to-one equivalency. I like drawing diagrams when I talk to some of my employees, and I tell them SCPs on AWS are equivalent to, for example, some use cases are equivalent to organization constraints on Google, and some use cases are equivalent to VPC service controls on Google. And then when you look at the VPC service controls on Google, they're equivalent, some use cases to SCPs in AWS, other use cases to RCPs, other use cases to declarative policies, and a few more. And that shows you this sort of many-to-many equivalence that makes this translation incredibly difficult.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. And I kind of want to just bookend that by highlighting something that he said about this approach and about you folks, which is that he called it the next big evolution in cloud security, which is a pretty big compliment to hear from the man himself. How did that make you feel when you heard him say that?
So obviously the type of validation, not just from Phil, but from all of our customers, makes us incredibly happy. Now we are at the stage where, our customers are starting to introduce us to another potential customers, which is the best sort of validation that we can have. But beyond that, I think it's actually how security needs to be done. When you look historically at on-prem environment, when you went and installed a new network in your office or whatnot, the first consideration, or one of the first considerations before the network was even up, was security. How do you architect it such that external actors cannot access, and so on and so forth? And somewhere in the evolution of cloud, everything sort of switched. And instead you saw developers moving first, and then security coming and shouting at them to change the things that they're doing. I am aiming for a future where security by design is baked into the cloud architecture, and it's a consideration from the get-go, or rather from the point in which they're starting to use native. And because of that, I do think that we are fundamentally changing how cloud security is done.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you. I want to take a step back now, and I want to hear a bit about the founder life, founder journey in this exciting space, in these exciting times as well. Because we spoke before this recording, and you mentioned that you've been on 40 flights in 6 months, and you were actually away when one of the wars in Israel broke out, when one of the conflicts arose, and you were kind of wrestling with how to get back, or like if and how and when. What's it like to be a founder? You know, come from like the background and experiences from the big corporate, you know, experience with Amazon to a scrappy startup starting off relatively young in a war zone or in wartime. Talk me through what that looks like on just a day to day. How does that make you feel? It's an interesting time.
So, well, I'll start from the bottom line. I couldn't be prouder to have to do a startup at this time and to be based in Israel during this time. Sure, it has its difficulties, and you mentioned the number of flights that have been taken. You know, everything going on with the war has made this even more difficult because flights are less available, and I need to plan in advance to get a seat in an era where planning is difficult, especially in a startup, because I might need to go visit a customer tomorrow. So this makes this incredibly more complex. But the story about my relationship in Israel. So during my time at AWS, I was based out of Seattle. And even then, before October 7th, I knew that when I went and eventually start my own company, I want this to be in Israel because it has the best engineers, and I have my relationships through my time in the Israeli Defense Forces and so on. And October 7th didn't change that for me. Sure, I've had my doubts, but within months after October 7th, I saw the resiliency from the Israeli market and how people, you know, despite the very difficult time that the country has gone through and is still going through in a way, you know, are still going to work every day and are working as hard, if not even harder, to deliver. And this sort of reinforced my desire to go and start my company with R&D, at least being based in Israel. And so when I decided to leave Amazon to start a company, it was abundantly clear to me that I'm still going to move back to Israel and lead the company out of here. And you probably recognize the Ayalon Highway from behind me. I am in Tel Aviv right now. Now, to your point from earlier on, during the last Iran war, I actually was quite accidentally on a flight to the US the day before to meet up with a customer, and then I got stuck there. Obviously, it was difficult being away from my family and friends and whatnot, but I decided to turn the lemon into lemonade, and that's how eventually 30 of these 40 flights were during this 2-month period where I was sort of stuck in the US, flying from one city to the other. And in certain weeks, I was literally spending the night at a different hotel in a different city every day. And it's because I wanted to get closer to the customers and hear, you know, what they're saying, both existing customers that are already using the platform, but also new potential customers, and seeing how they receive the word and so on. So from that perspective, being close to our customers has been fantastic, even though I was far from our team. After the war ended and I could finally get back as soon as my meetings, you know, I didn't book any new ones so that I could come back. And now I'm literally going back and forth. Since then, I've been to the US 2 additional times, to London 2 additional times. My next flight is in less than a month, also to the US. In the second half of 2026, I already have 5 additional trips to the US booked and 2 to London. That's what I know of now, and I'm sure that I will have additional customer engagements and so on coming up. And to me, it's part of that founder life, right? It makes work-life balance very difficult. But seeing our customers and the way that they talk about the product and some of the changes that we're bringing to them is very fulfilling.
No, it's amazing, and it kind of gives a view of what life was like before. Before the war, before October 7, but also kind of before COVID as well, because COVID
Yeah,
also grounded everyone. So the idea that founders would go and fly everywhere, to shake a hand or just to look at someone in the eye, it's incredibly valuable. I was always told that growing up, that when you fly across the world and you sit at the same table as someone, it's way more powerful than a simple screen to screen or a phone call. And it's
yeah.
nice to know that that's kind of returning to the world, but also to Israel.
It is right, and the current situation makes it more difficult. Like if I were to, if there was a customer meeting that needed me in New York City tomorrow, I would probably have to take some convoluted route because all of the Al flights are booked months in advance. But it's also fun. There is fun to it, to being able to look at the customer in the eye and them telling me what's working, and by the way, also what's not working. I value that feedback as well. And being able to incorporate that into the product and seeing them benefit it. And seeing, I was just in a conference in the US where we met one of our customers, and they went and told about us to a few other customers, and I could see sort of the network effect with my own eyes of them coming to our booth telling us, hey, I heard about you from this customer, that you did this and that for them. Show me. And then we hosted a dinner of all of those prospects and current customers, and one of them literally took out his laptop and showed someone from a different company how they were using our platform. And that to me was a moment where I was like, I'm so happy that I'm here to see that. And it's great that we are able to foster these in-person connections that really drive us forward, but also showed me that I've done, at least something correctly. Because here I have an advocate, not even a part of my company, talking on my behalf, sort of selling me to other customers.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I also want to ask you now about RSAC, and I want to ask about the experience there that you had, because you were debating publicly whether or not to even go, right? Because it was during the time of conflict, you weren't sure, but you did go and you went. So talk me through that feeling that you had and what led you to the decision that you ended up taking.
So for us, it was for me specifically, it was a bit different, right? Because I was stuck in the US as part of that same war. So I was already there. So it was easy for me to have gone. But no one of our Israeli team members have made it, including my co-founder, including my, my business development and partnership leaders, including a few of the people that were expected to man our booth during the show. And we did have that conflict. Like I could offer all of those same people, some recovery flight and try to pull strings with the airlines, or try to get a van to drive them to one of the borders to Egypt or to Jordan, and from them to start the journey from there and have it take like 36 or 48 hours for them to reach from Tel Aviv to San Francisco. And we made the difficult decision not to send our people there, not to have an Israeli presence there. And in a way, we were privileged because at that point we had a large enough US team that could cover for that. But we also recognize the importance of all of these people being close to their families and not going through some weird way that we weren't even sure if they could come back. Because many of my colleagues at Native, they have families, they have kids, they have wives, they have parents, and they spent the war with them. And now go and tell my co-founder, hey, go to the US for a 2 or 3 day conference, and then who knows when you can come back to Israel and be with your kids, seemed like an unbearable ask to me. So we made the difficult decision to have a smaller than expected presence at RSAC still have that presence, still be closer to customers, still hear from them about those challenges that we were discussing, but at the same time stretch myself thin and stretch everyone else on our US based team thin in order to let people in Israel have the confidence that they're at home, that they're not away from it, that they would, and then whether they would be able to come back to it or not. And it was a difficult decision, but I also think for us, given where we were, it was the right one.
Definitely. I mean, that's such a thing at the moment that people aren't always considering, because it's one thing to leave, but it's another thing. It's another one thing not being able to leave, but it's another thing being able to leave and then not being able to return. So
Right.
it's a two-way street. I want to now address the final part of our conversation and the final part of really kind of Gal himself and some of the things that maybe the listeners or readers may not know about you. One of the things that I found really interesting ahead of this recording is that one of the ways that you described tuning out and relaxing. So I imagine 40 of those plane rides, you weren't working on all of them. You were probably reading and watching TV and kind of resting. But there's also something you do outside of work when your feet are on the ground that you do at night. So talk us through one of the habits that you found yourself in at the moment. I don't want to spoil it for those
Yeah,
eagerly
yeah,
anticipating.
So it's funny you mentioned TV shows and whatnot. Before I started the company, by the way that I used to sort of clear my head at the end of the day was watch an episode of some TV show. That was my daily ritual before going to bed, heading home, watching an episode, clearing my mind, going to bed. Unfortunately, these days, it's a luxury that I don't often have, because when I'm in Israel and all of our customers are in the US, or most of them rather, I find myself in calls most evenings until 11 p.m., 12 midnight, 1 a.m., so on. And at that point, who has the time to watch an additional hour of a TV show? But a hobby that I developed during my time at Native after having started the company is actually attending the symphony and going to classical music concerts. And for me, if I'm able to plan in advance for that or book tickets, a couple of days in advance, I going to the symphony allows me to clear my mind, put my phone on silence, listening to great music, as opposed, by the way, to pop songs where I'm going and I'm listening to the lyrics and I want to understand them. With classical music, it's a literal immersion and clearing my mind. And so this has been an incredibly fun thing for me to do. And now I find myself doing that once every few weeks. In fact, later today, I'm going to a classical music concert. And I have tickets for another one over the weekend. And to me, it's just that opportunity to sort of clear my mind, listen to great music, spending some time with friends, and sort of slowing down after all of the rush and the hectic stuff that happens on the day-to-day basis.
No, I love it. I think it's such a wonderful way to accomplish the switching off that so many of us crave. Because anyone can put on classical music around the house, let's say, to relax. But you're right, your phone is still going to buzz, or the TV is still going to be there. So to put yourself in an environment where literally phone's away, this is the music. But also there's something quite beautiful about that, because the classical music is like a precision human craft. And it's a complete contrast to the AI automation world that you're in. So I found that contrast very interesting. I don't know if you thought about that or some of the ways that they may be.
I have. And in fact, the Israeli Philharmonic did a couple of weeks ago a concert with some AI written pieces, which I didn't get to attend because I was actually outside of Israel that week. But I do love seeing that human craft and seeing the more creative part of humanity in action. And to a point from earlier on, clearing my mind, listening to new music, because obviously every concert has a different program. Listening to new music, clearing my mind, and being able to immerse myself at the present, at this point in time. So I love that.
It's a skill that too many people don't have, especially young people as well. I find that I read somewhere, and I'm not saying this is you in the case, but a lot of young people can't just sit and be bored, right? They have to be doing something. They have to be scrolling something or reading something or watching something. They can't just sit and think
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And
And by the way, I
it's a form
know.
of dreaming, right? That's the importance of sleep, is that your brain rewires itself. And I use swimming as an example to do that, because
Mhm.
I have no devices, I have no watch or phone or music, and I'm just underwater, complete silence. No one can bother me. That's how I try and chase that. I wonder if young people are
And it's
contemplating.
exactly that, right? Like it's swimming, to your point, which, by the way, is one of my favorite workouts as well, because of exactly that point. I'm able to go in and immerse myself and do that for 45 minutes and an hour and like no interruption. Or those concerts that are even longer, they're like normally 2 hours or 2.5 hours of complete disconnect. So I can't afford that every day, but it's a really nice luxury.
Do you have a favorite composer or favorite genre?
Oh.
Or...
Um, I very much like uh, dramatic romantic pieces, especially from Russian composers from the last 100 or 200 years. So things by Prokofiev or Rachmaninoff, or even Khachaturian, who's a not as familiar one, but I love those pieces.
Oh, wonderful. I'll make sure to check them out after
Please
we're
do.
done. I'll make sure to.
I
You
can
can send
send you
me some
some
of your favorites.
recommendations. Yeah, I
I
will.
don't think I managed to catch the words that you were saying. The names were a bit foreign to my ears, so you may have to send me the links so I can
I
let
will.
them directly.
I will.
Gal, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'm aware that we're getting to the end of our conversation today, but I do want to end by asking you one last question, which is, you're around 40 people right now, 41 people in the native team, I think. You have said you want to become 90 by the end of the year. You want to double your numbers. You've got customers around the world. You've got $42 million, including a board member from a former Google Cloud world. It's a good place to be. So, what are some of the things that maybe keep you up at night, that keep you going?
It's a great place to be. And by the way, you mentioned 41. I believe we were 41 at the time of our out of stealth announcement. We are probably closer to 50 or even 55 now.
Wow.
Um,
And you might be even more by the time this comes out if there's a bit of a delay between
right,
recording and
right,
publication. So I'll
right.
make sure to qualify it in the text.
Right. A lot of things keep me up at night. That's part of the reason why I sometimes feel like I need that detachment. But at the end of the day, what keeps me going is the absolute belief that I have in what it is that we do and in what we're trying to accomplish on behalf of our customers. There is a reason this hasn't been done before. It's incredibly difficult to achieve. The technical problems we're solving are very hard, and we tackle some of those issues on an almost daily basis. Um, but really, what keeps me going is some of the customer feedback that I've told you earlier about, and my conviction in our ability, if we do this right, to actually change and completely revolutionize how cloud security is done.
Wow. Well, you have the validation and you have the confirmation and you have all the things that a company would strive for. So you're definitely hitting the ground running. And I'm
Thank you.
very grateful that we spent today talking and learning more about some of this space that's about to change. Gal, thank you so much for your time and insight today. I do have one last question for you. I almost forgot. What is the best way for everyone to follow you or keep up to date with some of the things that you're up to, either personally or company page? What's the best way to keep up to date?
Yeah, with me personally, I have my LinkedIn. I'm consistently posting there about some of those experiences. So feel free to just connect with me. I'm the only gal Ordo out there, so it's not like there are many people to choose from. And then follow our company page as well. We are continuously working on new content, on blogs, on customer stories, and we are publishing a lot there.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to put all of those links down so people can follow and easily keep up to date. Gal, thank you so much for your time and insight today. It was super interesting.
Thank you very much, James.